Nelson Mandela. He spent 27 years behind bars. His name, once whispered like a forbidden secret, was erased from newspapers, his picture banned, his voice silenced. Yet when he finally stepped into the sunlight, the world stopped. Cameras trembled, crowds wept, and a single man reminded humanity that forgiveness is stronger than vengeance. This is the story of Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, the prisoner who became president, the warrior who chose peace, and the soul who healed a nation torn apart by hate. Born in 1918 in the small village of Mvezo, in the Transkei region of South Africa, Mandela came from royal blood. His father, a respected chief of the Thembu people, taught him early the value of dignity, respect, and leadership. But in the land where he was born, the color of his skin defined his destiny. South Africa was a nation built on segregation, where opportunity was reserved for the few and silence was demanded from the many. From his youth, Mandela sensed that freedom was more than a dream. It was a right. He was educated in mission schools and later attended the University of Fort Hare, one of the few institutions open to black South Africans. There, his courage met its first test when he joined a student protest and was expelled. Rather than break him, the experience ignited a fire that would burn for the rest of his life. Moving to Johannesburg, Mandela found a city pulsing with inequality and resistance. He studied law, becoming one of the first black attorneys in the country, and dedicated himself to defending those without a voice. But his purpose soon expanded beyond the courtroom. At 25, he joined the African National Congress, the ANC, a movement devoted to ending racial oppression. His words, once confined to the walls of courtrooms, began to echo through the streets of South Africa. Mandela marched, organized, and spoke with conviction that could not be caged. Yet the apartheid government responded with brutality. In 1948, apartheid became law, a cruel system that divided a nation by race, stripping black South Africans of land, rights, and hope. Mandela's struggle deepened. He began to understand that peaceful protest alone would not dismantle a regime built on violence. With heavy heart and clear purpose, he helped form Umkhonto we Sizwe, the spear of the nation, the armed wing of the ANC. It was not hatred that led him there, but the belief that when all peaceful doors are closed, resistance must find another path. In 1962, Mandela was arrested, accused of sabotage and conspiracy. The government intended to silence him forever. During the Rivonia trial of 1964, standing before a white judge and facing a death sentence, Mandela delivered one of history's most powerful speeches. "I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination," he declared. "I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." Those words shook the conscience of the world. Instead of death, Mandela received life imprisonment. He was sent to Robben Island, a desolate fortress surrounded by icy waters, designed to crush the human spirit. His cell measured barely 2 meters by 2. No bed, no plumbing, just a thin mat on cold stone and a bucket for waste. Each morning he was forced to break limestone under the burning sun, the glare so harsh it damaged his eyes permanently. Guards mocked him, denied him letters, and restricted his visits, but they could not break him. Within those gray walls, Mandela became a teacher, a philosopher, and a leader. He organized secret classes for prisoners, discussing politics, history, and ethics. He learned Afrikaans, the language of his oppressors, not out of surrender, but out of strategy, to one day speak to them as equals. Years turned into decades. Mandela spent 18 years on Robben Island, then was moved to Pollsmoor Prison and later to Victor Verster. Through it all, he remained unyielding. His dignity, discipline, and compassion inspired not only his fellow inmates, but also the guards who once despised him. Outside the prison walls, his name became a rallying cry, Across continents, students protested, nations imposed sanctions, and the world began to see apartheid for what it truly was, an inhuman stain on civilization. The pressure mounted. By the late 1980s, the South African regime, isolated and crumbling, realized it could no longer hold back the tide of change. On February 11, 1990, the Iron Gates opened. After 27 years of captivity, Nelson Mandela walked free. His hair was gray, his step steady, his spirit unbroken. The world erupted in applause. Crowds filled the streets, singing his name, waving flags, crying tears of liberation. But while many expected vengeance, Mandela offered something unexpected: peace. He met with President F.W. de Klerk, his former enemy, and together they dismantled the laws of apartheid. In the face of decades of cruelty, Mandela urged forgiveness. "Let us build a nation," he said, "not by forgetting the past, but by rising above it." His leadership led South Africa into its first democratic election in 1994. The line to vote stretched for miles, men and women, young and old, standing under the sun for hours, ready to claim a right denied for generations. When the ballots were counted, Nelson Mandela became the first black president of South Africa. The prisoner had become the president. His inauguration was not a victory speech. It was a prayer for unity. He invited his jailers to attend. He wore a smile not of triumph, but of grace. His presidency was marked not by retribution, but by reconciliation. He created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, allowing both victims and perpetrators to speak, to heal, and to move forward. Mandela's vision of peace was not naive. It was revolutionary. He believed that real freedom comes not when chains are broken, but when hatred is released. He understood that a divided heart cannot build a united nation. He led by example, walking through the corridors of power with the same humility he carried in prison. When asked how he could forgive those who took away his freedom, he answered simply, "If I didn't, I would still be their prisoner." His words became a beacon for humanity. Leaders studied him, enemies respected him, and the oppressed saw in him the proof that moral courage is the highest form of power. In 1999, Mandela stepped down from the presidency, honoring his promise to serve only one term. He retired not to silence, but to service. He built the Nelson Mandela Foundation to promote education, health, and equality across the world. He traveled, spoke, and inspired until his final years. Even as age and illness slowed his steps, his voice remained steady, reminding generations that peace requires effort, that freedom demands responsibility, and that leadership means serving others first. Nelson Mandela passed away in December 2013 at the age of 95. The world mourned not just a leader, but a symbol of what humanity could be at its best. Bells rang across continents. Children sang his name in schools. Flags flew at half-mast, and millions gathered to say farewell. Yet his legacy did not end with his breath. It lives in every act of courage, every voice raised for justice, every handshake that replaces hatred. He proved that peace is not weakness, that forgiveness is not surrender, and that one soul, steadfast and humble, can transform the destiny of a nation. Today, his story is told not only in textbooks, but in the hearts of all who believe in dignity, resilience, and hope. The boy from Mvezo, who herded cattle, became a man who herded a divided people toward unity. The prisoner who looked through bars saw beyond them to a future of equality. Nelson Mandela taught the world that true power lies not in domination, but in the ability to uplift others. His life reminds us that the human spirit, once awakened, can never be imprisoned again. So when the world seems divided, when hatred rises once more, remember the man who emerged from darkness carrying only light. Remember the leader who chose peace when war was easier, and forgiveness when anger was justified. Remember Nelson Mandela, the man who turned pain into purpose, chains into courage, and silence into the voice of a nation. His footsteps still echo through history, urging each generation to stand, to forgive, and to build a world where freedom belongs to all. Subscribe to Echoes of Greatness for more stories of the minds and hearts that shaped our world, stories of vision, endurance, and the undying belief that even one person can change everything.